before you even get into Revit, there's a really cool feature. Whenever you install the CTC BIM Project Suite, you actually get this Revit Properties feature that's added to Windows Explorer or My Computer. And so what that allows you to do is right-click on a file and select Revit Properties. And this will give you a variety of information on the Revit file without actually having to open it. So you can see the file name, the version that it was saved is listed on the second row. So this is a 2013 Revit file. It lists the build that the file was last saved with. It lists the location, whether or not it's a Revit LT file versus the full Revit. And then it also tells you whether work sharing is enabled. And then in addition to all that, you can copy the image to the clipboard. You can copy the text that you see here to the clipboard if you're sending this along with a support email or something like that. And then you can even open the Revit file. So on this particular computer, I don't have Revit 2013, so it's listing the next closest one. And I can hit open, and in this case, it would obviously start upgrading the file right away. Another example of a file that actually has work sharing enabled. So again, we see this is a 2015 format. We see the build, and then work sharing model. So when it says central here, that means yes, it's a work sharing model. And then is central file, yes. So this is the central file that I just right-clicked on. And then the path to the central file is listed down below. Because I have Revit 2015 on this computer, it went ahead and aligned the version of Revit with the version the file was saved in. So if I were to hit open now, it would open Revit 2015 if it wasn't already opened, and then open this file. Now, you're probably thinking, well, this is a central file, so is it going to open the central file? As soon as I hit open, because it's a central file, it gives me this prompt to create a new local or just open the central file directly. So I'm going to close that, and then this is a local file. I'm going to go to Revit Properties, and here it's saying, well, it's saying central, so that means work sharing is enabled, and then is central file says no, so this is actually a local file, but it's still telling me where the central file is. So I'm going to go ahead and close that, and again, if you install the CTC BIM Project Suite, which has several free tools in it, you'll also get this Revit Properties feature, which is really cool. All right, so I'm going to close that, and then in this particular file, well, first of all, there's a Revit Express Tools tab, and you can see there's two panels, the CTC BIM Manager Suite and the CTC BIM Project Suite. So the BIM Manager, it's kind of obvious it's meant to be like higher level. Not every user needs to necessarily have access to these tools. The BIM Project Suite would be tools that everybody in the office that uses Revit would typically benefit from, is the idea. And then on each panel, the first set of tools that are the lighter color, so in this case, the first 4 light blue tools, and then on the BIM Project Suite, these several light green tools are the tools that are completely free. And so if you download both of these separate install files from CAD Technology Center's website, you can actually start using those free tools right away. And then after I show you the free tools, I'll show you some of the tools that tie into the paid version. And actually, off the top of my head, I have no idea how much either one of these costs, so you'll have to talk to CTC about that. But the first one I want to show you, which again, these first several tools are going to be the free tools, is the Project Cleaner. So on the BIM Manager Suite, there's this Project Cleaner tool, And so the context in which you might want to use this is, say you're an architectural firm or an MEP firm, and you're about to share the Revit model with the other consulting firm, so the structural engineer or the architect or the MEP firm. And a lot of firms tend to want to remove their schedules and to kind of protect their shared parameter layout and how their schedules look. I know we receive a lot of files from MEP firms where all their schedules are removed because we have our own MEP services. So in theory, we could take their schedule and reuse it is kind of the thinking. It also cleans up the file a little bit. I don't think this is exclusively necessary just to make the file smaller, but it can clean house a little bit before you send the file to another firm, and it only takes a few seconds to do. So this particular project, you can see it has lots of views, floor plans, 3D views. There's several schedules and several sheets. And so if I click on the Project Cleaner tool, with just a few quick clicks, I can select all of the views, schedules, and legends to be removed. By checking the box next to views, that checks everything in this nested tree. And then I can go in and uncheck usually one of each of the main floor plans, just so when somebody opens the project, they're not going to open up a project with hardly any views in it. The view that we're currently in can't be deleted, so that's why I switched to this floor plan before I started this tool. And then we can go to the Sheets tab. So just that one click is going to cause all the sheets to be deleted. And then this, if you have links, either Revit links or DWGs, you can check those. You might not want to remove the Revit links. If they're overlays, they'll be somewhat irrelevant anyways. But if there's a bunch of DWGs linked into drafting views, for example, and you're deleting all the sheets anyways, you could perhaps go in here and remove all the DWG links as well. So once you've selected all of that, you just click the Remove tool, and it tells you how many views, sheets, and links are about to be removed. So we hit OK, and as quick as that, all the sheets, schedules, and views have been removed from the project. Now, I wish this tool also included the ability to run the purge command as part of that. And those of you who are familiar with AutoCAD's purge command, you used to have to run purge command in AutoCAD 2 or 3 times, and then they added the purge nested checkbox. Perhaps Autodesk will be adding that someday, but right now you can see there's 556 items, so you have to run purge a maximum of 3 times to completely purge anything that's purgeable in the project. So now we could save this file and send it off to the consultant, and it's pretty well cleaned. So I'm going to close this file now and go back to the original file that hasn't been cleaned, so we can move on to the next tool. Oh, and so I mentioned that it would be nice if it had the purge tool built in. They actually have added a couple of nice features in a recent update where you can click on About, and then there's a button here to place a feature request or a bug report. Last night when I was playing around with the Quick Select tool, I found a bug, and so I was able to click on this and let them know about it. So after this presentation, you can all click on Request Feature and say, I want you to include the purge tool in this project cleaner. All right, so let's see, moving on to the next free tool that I'm going to cover is the Revision Cloud Remover. So the reason this is handy is because when you select a revision cloud and right-click, you can't go to select all instances in View or in Project. So you can delete a revision, which would in turn delete all the clouds and tags as long as the revision isn't issued. But we have this on the BIM Projects Suite. We have the Rev Cloud Remover. So I click on that, and I can just simply click all three of these. So there's 3 revisions in this project, and scattered throughout the project, there's various applications of revision clouds and tags. Just so happens that revision 1 you can see here is issued, and if you go into About, it says this tool removes selected non-issued revision clouds. So I should expect that not to work because an issued revision can't be edited. So when I click this, I will get an error. But the other 2 revisions, all their corresponding clouds and tags get deleted. So I would have to go and unissue that revision if I wanted that to work for revision 1. So now all the revision clouds are removed from the project. All right, so those are the 2 free ones from the BIM Manager suite I wanted to show. Now the BIM Project suite, I will cover, I guess I'll just cover them in order. So the BIM List Browser, well, I'll do the browser first and then talk about the admin. So the BIM List Browser, I click on this, and it's going to load content that can be loaded into your project. And I actually meant for this to start out on the local one. Let me switch that real quick. So this is not content in the project. This is content perhaps from your C drive, the out-of-the-box Revit content, or your firm's server location. And all of this can be done with the free version. So right off the bat, I'm showing you an example of the detail items. So all of the 2D content that would be mainly intended to be used in drafting views. So if I pick on Division 9 finishes, one thing that's different here is you can't really have sub-tabs over here. So if you're familiar with the detail items, you'll know under finishes there's a couple of folders. But what's nice about this is when you select this category, Division 9, you can do a really quick search. So if I know I'm about to place a joist, or actually I'm thinking about my next example when I go to Division 5. So right now I want to place a stud. So I type stud, and here's all the studs and sections. So CH stud for shaft walls, and here's the metal stud. And if I expand this, rather than dragging this family and dropping it and getting all the types, I could select just the type I want and drag that into the project. So now when I select that and go to the type selector here, you can see it just loaded that one type. And this particular family is the out-of-the-box family. It's not using a type catalog. Another thing you can do is right-click on these and save as a favorite, or you can look at the properties and see if anybody has added comments. So maybe we want to look at the runners. So here's the runner channel and section. And you can see how many times these families are loaded as well. So this has been used 4 times. Maybe the runner top and runner side are never used. And so maybe those could just be deleted from the folder if this is on your server and not just the out-of-the-box content on your C drive. So if I go to the metals category, and here's where I intended to type joist. So here's the K-series bar joist. I can just drag, if I just grab that and drag it into the project, just the main name, it will load all the types. So let's see, so right now I'm using a local database. There's another option. Well, okay, so the local database is completely free, and if we switch over to the BIM List admin tool, we can actually export this database, and then anybody else in the office can import it. So all of that is free, and copying that file around isn't too hard, but it takes a little extra work. And not everybody wants to run the setup tool for this entire folder because it might take a half hour for this tool to process it the first time. The CTC sells a server tool for BIM List so that you can put databases out on the network. And then everybody can just point to this, and then an administrator can update the library. So now you can see there's a library of casework here, for example. And if I start typing 18, not only does the search dialog box look for the name of the family, you can see it's also dialing into all the type settings as well. So maybe I want to find 18-inch wide families in this project. So this just expanded all the types so that I can see all the dimensions that have 18-inch W in the name. All right, so that part is, like I said, an extra cost if you were to want to do the server version. Let me close out of this for a minute now and show you kind of how this is set up. So we're going to go to the BIM List Administrator, which is a little bit more of a complex interface. And so here you can click Add and create a new group, a tab, or import folders or individual families or projects. So with that in mind, let's switch back to the browser for a second. So here are groups, so you can have different groupings in this drop-down list. And then here are tabs, and then this would be an individual family that was imported. So just to put that in context for you, I'm going to go back into the BIM List Administrator, and I'm going to switch this to the local. So to set up the detail items, I went to Add. I created a group called Detail Items, and then I went to create a tab, or actually, sorry, let me delete that. Rather than creating individual tabs, I went to Folder, so I can pick a folder, like the Detail Items folder that comes with Revit, and then tell it to include all families and subfolders, and then it just pulled in everything you see here at once. Now another super cool thing that you can do is click on Project. And so I'm going to browse to the folder that has my wall types in it. So a lot of times firms have container files for wall types because you don't want every single wall type in your template, because that might be hundreds of wall types. So there's a container file and maybe more than one where you open that file and copy paste wall types that have been predefined in your firm into your current project. Well, this kind of shortcuts that. So I'm going to pick this metal studs wall type file, and then I get this prompt here where I can create a new tab. I'll call it metal stud walls. And then for the wall types, I'll just grab a couple of these as an example, but I'll drag these wall types over and then click OK. So now when I close this, I'm going to say yes to save. And just so you can see, I'll select a wall in this project, and you can see these are all just pretty much out-of-the-box wall types in this particular project that we're in. So if I go to the BIM List Browser now, and notice in my group drop-down list, I have that metal stud walls. And then here are wall types that I can bring into the project that didn't previously exist in the project. So that is super cool. And again, that is all part of the free version of this tool. So you saw that there are other categories within the project file. Of course, that project file, what it's named and where it's located needs to be consistent, because this tool is going to be extracting that information out of that file. So that should be located in a common location on the server. And so you can have multiple tabs down the left here for wood studs and shaft walls, soffit framing, bulkhead framing. So all of that is super cool as far as the BIM List Browser goes. Let's see, so that's all I had for the BIM List Browser. Back to the Revit Express Tools tab. The next thing I'm going to show, this is the last free one that I'm going to talk about. This is the Renumbering tool. I'm going to zoom out here a little bit. So when I click on the Renumbering tool, you have the ability to renumber rooms, doors, grids, detail numbers on sheets, and then there's just a general tool to renumber the mark parameter in any particular piece of content. So if I click on the Rooms tab, and let's say I want to start with room number 100, I could go ahead and click the Renumber button and start clicking rooms. But if a room already has room 100 assigned to it, it'll give me an error, duplicate type mark. So to help alleviate that error, there's an auto swap tool. So if I'm just renumbering the rooms, I'm probably going to end up with the same amount of room numbers, just reorganized. So if Revit just swaps whatever currently is 100 with the room I pick, by the time I work all the way to the end, all the rooms should be properly renumbered. So I'm going to go ahead and click Renumber, and then this switches to show, to point out the fact that you need to press Escape to finish the selection mode. I'm just going to work my way around and click on rooms. So 100, 101, 102, 103, and then I could just keep going until I'm done, and then I click Escape. So notice how the dialog box there is able to stay open even though I zoom in and out. The next one we'll look at is the door renumbering tool. So similarly, you could just start picking doors and order them or number them in any order you want. In this case, I'm going to change it so that it renumbers the door based on the room the door swings into. So I can specify the to room setting. And so now when I click Renumber, if I click this door, it just changed the door number to 109. Rooms that have more than one door, the first door you pick on, it changes it to 115. The second door you pick on, oh, and I forgot to check that auto swap option. So it gave me a little bit of an error there, but it still changed the first door to 115A, and then the second door to 115B. Now this is just a little side tip on Revit in general. Let's see, so if I select a door and flip it, the little point I want to make just about Revit in general is the to room setting doesn't change automatically when you flip a door like that. So if I go to the renumbering tool and go to doors, renumber based on room, and then auto swap. So I pick this door again, and it still thinks it's swinging into door 115 or into room 115. So that's creating a little bit of a problem. to look at that a little bit more closely, I can create a quick schedule. So I'm going to create a door schedule. I'll call it the door swing schedule. And I will schedule the mark. And then in the lower left here, in addition to scheduling items from the door category, I can schedule the to room number and the from room number. And maybe I'll sort this by mark. So that was door 115A. And you can see it's swinging to room 115A. So even though I flipped the door, this didn't change. And that's just the way Revit's designed, for better or worse. But in the schedule, interestingly enough, we can switch it. So when I switched the to room setting, the from room necessarily changed as well. So we just fixed that situation. So now when we go back to the renumbering tool, it will now read room 114, and then this will change to 115. One other thing you can do if you just edit your door family to add the new room calculation point, that will cause the door to automatically flip. But you want to do that at the beginning of a project rather than halfway through with your content. So also in the renumbering tool, let me go to a sheet real quick. So I have a A600 detail sheet, and perhaps we want to change the numbering. Right now it goes 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'll select the renumbering tool, and I'll go to detail numbers, and we want to do the auto swap again. Otherwise we'd have overlapping numbers. So I click on 1, even though it's already 1, so that didn't change. Actually, I'm going to stop that because I picked the wrong thing. So I'm going to start with number 1. Auto swap is selected. Renumber. So 1, 2, 3, 4. And you just have to click on each viewport. And you can see everything updated its number automatically. There's a similar tool with grids. So the structural engineer, if they need to renumber their grids, they could use this tool, or architecturally for an existing building perhaps. All right, just seeing if there's any questions here real quick. So it doesn't look like there's any questions. So everything I just showed up to this point, other than the networked version of the BIM list content, is the free tools. Now I'm going to start talking about, oh, there's one other free tool I almost missed. And actually this is one of the coolest free tools there is, the quick select tool. So let me back out here a little bit. And if I go to quick select, this allows us to select things in a way that's not otherwise possible with Revit selection tools. So I'm sure everybody knows you can select a big window and then go to the filter and narrow that down to just doors and windows perhaps. And so now I have just doors and windows selected. Or you could select everything in the model. And this feature is also the same in AutoCAD. If you have several things selected in the model, in the type selector or the properties palette, it tells you that there's 282 things that are selected, and it says common, meaning that there's multiple categories selected. But from this drop-down list, you can see a breakdown of the categories and how many elements in each category. And if I pick doors with the number 14 after it, all 282 elements are still selected in the model, but right now the properties have been dialed into just the door properties. and then I can switch to windows, and now I'm just editing the window properties. So those two features are really handy in Revit for selection. But then there's some other things that you can't do, and I'm going to talk a little bit about what you can do with this quick select tool. So first of all, the filter can be either applied to the entire project. So like when you select something and right-click and go to select all instances, in entire project would be equivalent to this project option. And then in active view or in current view or whatever it says would be equivalent to this active view option, or it could be based on something you've already selected before starting this tool. But so entire project, and then by default filters is selected. Most of the time I switch it to category, but it's interesting to note that all the filters that you've created in the project, not necessarily a filter applied to this view, but a filter created in the project, can be selected here and then hit update selection. And now in this case, all the wall cabinets in the project have just been selected. I could click OK here and then start doing something with that in the model, or I can expand this list and see what types of families were just selected, and then we can keep selecting it all the way down to the instance. So that's pretty handy. So I hit OK, and there's 8 wall cabinets selected in the entire project. If I go to quick select again, I can switch this to category, and maybe in this case I'll select casework. And then once I pick a category, now these parameters down below become available. If I just click, I'm going to click replace selection set rather than add, so I could add whatever I'm about to select to the previously selected 8 wall cabinets. So I'm going to hit update, and because I hit replace selection set, now it's just giving me a new selection of just anything that's in the casework category. So because I didn't narrow things down, it selected everything in the project that's in the casework category. However, I could narrow things down, and maybe I'm interested in like the height, and I can start typing it here too. I don't have to necessarily find it in that big drop-down list. So height equals, and because it's set to equals, similar to schedules in Revit, all the actual options that exist are showing up here. I don't have to guess at what one of the options might be. So I'm going to select 3 foot and then hit update. So here I can just make sure, maybe I want to, at some point in a project, somebody put in a counter or a base cabinet that's 3 feet high, and it didn't account for the countertop thickness, so it wasn't the right height. In this case, though, I can see that these are actually both wall cabinets, so it must be the height is the height of the wall cabinet. Another interesting example is, let's say somebody accidentally typed the department, and like any good cooking show, I have this mistake already set up here. So at least I thought I did. Let's see. Oh yeah, here it is. So somebody accidentally typed in the department in this occupancy parameter. So we want to really quickly select all the rooms that have that value in occupancy. So I'm going to switch this to category, and then I'm going to go to rooms, and then I'm going to go to O, type O to jump down, and there's a couple of things here now. I don't remember what it was. It was either occupant or occupancy, but if I pick occupant and equals, there's no option, so that must be the wrong one. So I'm going to go back to occupancy equals, and there's one option where somebody entered the department here. So now I click update, and all the rooms that have the incorrect information plugged in, I can just cut and paste to the correct field now. So there's lots of really cool things that you can do with this. If you look at the category drop-down list, there's things like the view name and title block. You can see, and then once you select one of these categories, there's lots of parameters that show up that are even more than what normally show up in the schedule. For example, one thing that you can select here is revision clouds. And last night when I was playing around with this, I noticed that you could also select revisions. And when I selected it, it selected those 3 revisions that were already in this project. And then I hit OK. And with those 3 revisions selected, I went ahead and hit the delete key. I got a fatal error because that's probably not a good way to delete revisions in Revit apparently. So I clicked on the About button here and clicked on Report Bug. So that'll be fixed, I bet, in the next update. So that's the Quick Select tool. So everything there was all the free stuff. So now I'm going to go on to the paid tools. Looks like there's one question. The question is whether or not the Quick Select tool is able to select instances within a legend, and I'm not entirely sure, actually. So I don't claim to be an absolute expert on every one of these tools, and in fact, there's some here that I haven't even tried yet. I do get a chance to try a lot of them, like in a beta version, but I don't know the answer to that. It'd be pretty easy to test, though, and it's the free one, so I would give it a try. All right, so going back to the BIM Manager Suite, starting to look at the tools that actually cost money, and I think you get like a free 30-day trial when you first install it. But the Family Processor is a super cool tool, and I'm going to go open a family. So before you can start that tool, you have to be in a family. And so the first thing that you can do that's really handy with the Family Processor is actually just use it to upgrade content. So you've upgraded to Revit 2016. You want to take your 2015 content and perhaps you've copied it into another folder and you just need to upgrade it. There's a couple of tools out there that do that, but when you have this tool, it's pretty handy. And maybe as part of that exercise, well, the first thing you do when you open this is click New Settings, just to make sure everything's reset to the defaults. But then on the Change Materials tab, perhaps you want to make sure that all of these families don't have these default materials. You have a really nice material list in your template, and every time you load a piece of content from your library, these materials keep getting recreated. So maybe you want to purge them out of your content. And so all the materials that are listed here happen to be the ones that are in this particular family that's open. So you might want to open the most messy, complicated family maybe to do as your starting point. So I select these and click Add. So notice I'm on the Change Materials tab, and then there's some sub-tabs: Delete Materials, Add Materials, Materials to Change. So right now I'm just interested in deleting some materials, and then select which families to modify. So I'm going to go to Browse, and then I'm going to go to that Content folder, and notice Search in Subfolders is checked. So this can do your entire library. It's only looking for RFA files. So if you have any like container files in there for your wall types, for example, you'd have to upgrade those separately. But I'm just going to select let's say 4, instead of doing the whole library, so it doesn't take too long. And I'll click Add, and there's an option here to resave even if no changes are needed. And then in parentheses, it says exactly what we're about to do. Useful for upgrades. And then I'll hit Begin Process, and then Continue. And so here, these are just small annotation families, so it takes just a matter of seconds to upgrade those 4 families. And so now they're upgraded and ready to be used. Another interesting thing that you can do, you can get much, much more complicated with the family processor. So let's say we have a basic wall cabinet, and I'm going to add, I'm just totally making up something here, a parameter for volume. And it's going to be area. And then this will have a formula. So width times height times depth. And so, oh, and then divided by 1 foot, so we don't create a problem. So with this unique parameter that also happens to have a formula, I'm going to use the Revit family processor to push this parameter into a whole bunch of other families. And one family won't have one of these values, like depth, for example. So in that family, it'll still make the parameter, but then the formula won't exist. And it'll show us an error that that wasn't able to be done. So family processor, first step again is to hit new settings and clear everything out, because otherwise it would remember those materials that I wanted to delete. And in this case, you basically start with the tab at the left and work your way to the right is the intended workflow here. So you could change materials. In this case, we want to change parameters, and I'm going to scroll down. So I don't want to delete any parameters. And I could add shared parameters if I wanted to, add family parameters. So here's volume. I'm going to click Add, and I can tell it what group to put it in. I can see the formula. I can switch it to an instance parameter. If I add a shared parameter, up here at the top, there's a place to browse to your shared parameters file. And now I'm going to select some content. So here's this folder with just a few wall cabinets in it. So select all, move them down here, and then I'm going to run the process. So it's saying exactly what's going to happen. In this case, it's only adding the volume parameter, and I'll hit go. So you can see there's one error at the bottom, and it was actually this upper wall cabinet filler panel that doesn't have all the parameters. So it still created the parameter, but it didn't add the formula. And I was originally planning on opening that and showing it to you, but for sake of time, I see we're running a little short here, and I still have a few more things that I want to show you. So in a project, the next thing I want to show you is the import and link manager. So if I type VV right now and go to imported categories, I can see that there's a DWG link. I don't know what, from here I can't tell if it's imported or linked. And then if I go to the Manage Links tab or dialog box, because I don't see that DWG here, I know that that DWG was imported, which is typically not a good thing to do, but nevertheless, it's been done. And in a big project with hundreds of views and perhaps that link, that imported, it's not a link, but the imported CAD file was selected and hidden in view, it might be nearly impossible to find that link. So with this Revit Express Tools BIM Manager Suite Import and Link Manager, I can select the link, and it lists other things like image files that are linked in. I'll select this DWG, tells me here what type it is, and I just hit remove. So now that DWG wherever it happened to be, it doesn't exist in this file anymore. And you can also do that with Revit links and those image files that you saw there. So the last one I'll mention, I'm not going to show you, is this watermark tool, and I don't use that directly, but we actually created the electrical productivity pack that CTC sells as part of Revit Express Tools suite of tools, and they'll use this watermark tool for each company that they sell it to. And it's not something you can see on the screen, but the content has this mark on it that can't be erased, and can just kind of help track down where something came from if it starts showing up somewhere online for free. And obviously the company might not be aware of that, but at least they can be alerted to the fact that something like that happened. All right, so now the paid tools on the BIM project suite. The first one I want to show you is the fire rating tool. So there's a couple of walls here that have a rating around them on the first floor. So if I select this tool, it basically adds a line and a tag to every rated wall. So you'd probably maybe do this in a code plan, for example. You click on the fire rating tool, it lists all the walls that have a fire rating. In this example, I only have one. There's 4 walls that have a 1-hour fire rating. If I go to mappings, you won't do anything for the ones that don't have a fire rating, but I could perhaps pick a line type that I created. I'm just going to pick hidden for this first example, and then a wall tag. And if you don't have one created, you can use some default ones that CTC provides. So I'll click load default wall tag. And so at least now I have something to pick, but you'd probably end up wanting to pick your own. And again, you'd make a custom line type here that was probably really thick. And then on this last tab, you could actually have it do this, because all of this is per view. So you can have it do it to the code plan, the architectural plan, what's the spacing of the wall tag, and then you have the ability to generate, update, or remove graphics. So the first time we're doing it, obviously we want to click generate, and you'll see it added a line type and a tag. And so if anything changes, we come back in here and hit update. If a wall moves, like for example, this wall moves north a little bit, the wall tags will move with the wall, but the line itself won't. And this error is actually related to, I think, an in-place family in this kitchen, so we'll just ignore that. But it's actually too bad that these lines don't have the move with nearby elements feature. I don't know if you're familiar with Tim Waldock and his blog Revit Cat. So Tim Waldock, and he has a blog called Revit Cat, and he has this really great post on this feature or this parameter in properties called moves with nearby elements. And what he says is perfectly right on. What this should say is moves with nearby walls, because that's all this really cares about is walls. So now that I've checked that, when this wall moves again, that particular vending machine will continue to move with the wall. So it's going to align itself with whatever's the closest to it. So you could do that with plumbing fixtures as well. Instead of having hosted wall cabinets or plumbing fixtures, you just do that moves with nearby elements. And unfortunately, these lines don't have that option. All right, so moving on, the parameter jammer is the next thing I want to talk about. So if you import manufacturer content into your project, you'll end up inevitably having a problem where you can't edit the parameters for a particular family that you loaded unless you're using setting up your shared parameters as project parameters. And in that case, when you select one thing, like in all your air handling unit parameters are in the mechanical equipment category. And so when you select a pump, all your air handling properties show up. So a lot of people just load their shared parameters directly into the family, and then set those up directly in the schedule. And so if an outside piece of content loaded from a manufacturer, you can't edit these values. So this parameter jammer tool basically will take parameters from a selected schedule and jam them into the selected piece of content that you just loaded that isn't working with your schedule. So I'm going to load the parameter jammer tool, and so you pick which schedule has the shared parameters in it that you want, and then you pick the fixture, and then you go to next. And if there's same named parameters, it'll actually map them for you. In this case, I just want it to create these parameters because they don't already exist in the family. But if there's same name parameters, it'll swap out that manufacturer's parameter for your version of the shared parameter, but keeping the manufacturer's formula or information intact. I had an example I wanted to show after this one, but I don't think I'll have time. So I just modified the 2x4 light fixture. And so now in this schedule, I can edit and add information to that parameter or that column, which previously I couldn't because that manufacturer light fixture wasn't compatible with my totally custom schedule with shared parameters. All right, moving on. There's another option here called Schedule XL. So sometimes we get schedules that are just information that aren't necessarily related to the model directly. And so the Schedule XL allows you to suck in an Excel file, and it'll actually show up in the Schedule section of the project browser. So here are all the tabs, all the worksheets in this particular file, this Excel file that I just browsed to. And so I can put a window around what I want, and I'll just do this quickly. I have one more big one I want to show here. And so once I do this, notice that there's a new schedule added to the project browser, and this will update automatically every time you open the project. And the formatting is exactly like the Excel file. The trickery that they do here is everything happens in the schedule header. There's one dummy row here, and it's filtered out. All right, the last thing, oops, don't want to close it completely, that I want to show. We're going to have a little bit of time here at 1 o'clock for questions, but I've kind of saved the best for last here. So Spreadsheet Link. If I click on Spreadsheet Link, this allows me to edit data in the model using a Microsoft Excel interface, and you don't even have to have Excel on your computer for this to work. The coolest part about this is that you can select in the lower left here schedules that already exist in the project. So if I double click on Room Finish Schedule, it's going to completely and instantly build this schedule in Excel. And so I can come in here and type something like the paralegals get carpet 22. And then once I get a pattern going there, I can use the regular Excel features. So maybe 1, 2, 3 just to do something, and then apply to the Revit database. And I got a couple of errors there. I'm not sure why, but maybe it's because I typed the number. And do you want to save the settings? Because it was just a quick schedule that we selected, we don't really need to do that. So when I go back into the schedule here, notice the parameters are updated. So this is a super powerful tool. You can actually save this to an exported Excel file, and somebody who doesn't even have Revit can edit the schedule, and then bring that information can be pulled back in later. The trick is that you can't edit the first 2 rows or the first 2 columns, because that's the the element ID number and specific info. You can also use this tool to create new sheets. So if you were to come down here to Sheets, the tool has been modified to be smart and know what a new sheet is. So I could say I want to create 10 new sheets and which title block to use. These are presentation sheets, and click Create. I come back here and maybe I want a Peers and Sheet list to show up, because all of these are presentation sheets. They should not show up. So I type in false. Helps if you spell it correctly, of course. And then apply. So now there's going to be 10 new sheets in the project that aren't going to show up on the schedule. You can see here's a new sheet and appears in sheet list, and I think it's because I didn't type it right. I had my caps lock on, so that's what the error was that we saw, but it still created 10 new sheets. And there's all kinds of things you can do with that. If you start drilling into the unique properties that show up when you're in that and you select like the room category, there's 10 times more properties you have access to than what you'd see as properties in a room schedule. So that's all I have. Are there any questions? Looks like right at the moment there's no pending questions. When you're doing the trial, you'll probably want to check out this view creator as well. This will allow you to actually add additional levels to the project if they weren't already here, like you needed to add a level 2 and 3. And then you can tell Revit to create a plan view for this level using these view templates and for these phases. So perhaps you need an existing and a new construction view for level 1 using the architectural template, view template. It'll create 4 views for you immediately. And this also has the ability to manipulate sheets and title blocks as well. So there's lots of really cool features in the suite of Revit Express Tools. I know there's tons of add-in options out there in the world, and it definitely overwhelms me often trying to keep straight all the options that are out there. But this one has a nice, pretty wide variety collection of items, and a good number of the really good ones that I use all the time are free. So I want to just kind of share that with everybody.